Happy holidays, everyone. Today, we are here with Patrick. Patrick was a mechanical engineer at USC, and he's now a new grad product manager at Dropbox. Instead of telling you about Patrick, I'm going to turn it over to Patrick, and Patrick's going to tell you just a little bit about his background and to learn more about himself. Go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah. Hey, y'all. I guess my name is Patrick. I was in mechanical engineering at USC. Now work in product management at Dropbox, like a new grad PM. Backgrounds, I don't know. I like traditionally like worked in like more like normal mechanical engineering jobs. So I'd worked in like underwater robotics or in like a drone company. Then kind of knew I wanted to take a step back. So went about meandering, spent some time in venture, and then ultimately landed in like a product role at like a hardware company. Kind of fell in love with product management through that, and then was able to kind of use that experience to then get into like an official quote unquote like new grad PM program. So here I am.
Now, Patrick, that was a bit vague. So I know a lot of people kind of structure their internships every summer to like end up getting a product management role. So could you tell us a little bit more about like, did you think about like what classes that you wanted to take and the internships that you wanted to do, and what were the actual internships you ended up doing?
Yeah, so I guess what ultimately kind of enabled me to like get hired in like actual product is I worked at the boring company basically on their flamethrowers for 6 months. So kind of super scrappy. Worked on like gave me a fair amount of responsibility, and it was ultimately like somewhere between product and engineering. So I think that's what I was kind of able to like basically like what enabled me actually like get hired in like tech quote unquote. With regards to classes, I think like my like path to product management is perhaps like a little more unusual. Like I have a background in hardware and I'm working at a software company. So I like could definitely like gone down slightly down the software rabbit hole and have been like taking some classes for fun on the side with regards to like having like a minor in like computer science or like something around that. So doing some like mobile work, um, but it was that was more just kind of a little bit like knowing what I don't know in the area. Definitely not becoming like a proficient like software engineer. Um, I guess I knew kind of like sophomore year I wanted to like step back from mechanical engineering and to go work in another field. So I like started putting together a list of like I have a portfolio of mechanical engineering, but I don't really have a portfolio in like quote unquote product or in other fields. So I just started kind of pursuing personal projects. So like I like used to barter on Craigslist, so I like traded up from a spoon to a car, and I had done like stuff like that previously. Up to a motorcycle, but made it like slightly more legit because that was like an actual story that you can tell to people during like hiring that like is slightly more along the business side, maybe not in product, but like was outside mechanical engineering. Or I like started building kind of like I don't know, like some like microsites or micro projects or like things that were more along like product management that could be kind of leveraged into that. So perhaps I was a little bit less like systematic about it, or like went and like interned in product and then interned again in product. I went to go work in like product somewhere. But I guess this is where I've ended up.
Would you then say that it's not necessarily your domain knowledge that you think landed the role, but like the skills that you developed in all of these different things, like the Craigslist, working at the Boring Company, and then your hardware product management roles?
Yeah, I think that's like a fair assumption. I guess I've like kind of flown into like product management like fairly like blind in a way. Like I've never worked at a software company before. I've never like officially worked in product before. I have a degree in mechanical engineering. So I think it was kind of leveraging these like personal projects on the side and kind of being able to like weave a story around those and like a narrative around those and less about like physical like resume expertise.
What was the story that you crafted around to really sell yourself?
Yeah, I guess it was like having while still having an engineering background and being able to like use that to like build products and like slowly kind of move up the product food chain to eventually like, get a job in it. So it started like just building like websites on the side for like personal things or like selling things online or like trading on Craigslist or to then like working on like actual products where we had sold 20,000 of them for like $10 million and like working on that, then kind of moving from that to like a actual like quote unquote software company that like has like engineers and like a team of people who like work on products that touch millions of people. So it was perhaps like that progression.
What do you think were the main skills that you took away from all these experience that helped you land that product role?
Yeah, that's hard. I guess maybe like the main one is like it's far scrappier than I thought it would be, and you can get like pretty far like in product just by kind of being scrappy. like the way you build features or the way you like build products, like there's a fair amount of kind of like there's no like clean cut and defined process. Like everybody has their own methods and all these different methods work, and um like you like it's just not like when I worked in like mechanical engineering, I was like handed a spec, I was like stay below these constraints, and then you build it to the best of your ability to meet that. And like product management is so like different. There's like no like single path towards success, and there are multiple ways that you can get there. Perhaps that's a little cliche, I don't know.
Now, okay, so you did all these different side projects. You kind of just did what you really enjoyed doing and kind of made you happy working at hardware companies, majoring in mechanical engineering. How did you find out about software product management, and what made you decide to recruit for that or go after this Dropbox role?
Yeah, so I guess I was lucky. I was working during kind of like my final like summer before graduating at the boring company on Flamethrowers. Had like kind of realized what I was doing was product work more, less definitely not in a software realm, more in like a hardware realm, and thought of like this was a lot of fun. I had a great time. Thought like it used my skill set pretty well. Thought like I was learning a lot, and thought like I wanted to leverage that, and like be able to kind of move into like a more official product role. That was basically wrapping up there. Project was finishing. Then started investigating like, yes, there are product roles in mechanical engineering, but there's also like an entire slew of actual jobs called like being a PM in product management. Started going down like the normal like rabbit hole of like bot like cracking the PM interview. From there, was able to look at that initial list of like companies that hire in product and see like slightly more updated versions of that. And then basically just started interviewing.
What made you want to do software product management instead of hardware, or just continue to work at the boring company?
Yeah, I guess it was a couple things. Of like, I kind of realized through college, like the world, or I didn't realize, the world isn't going to hardware, like the world is going to software. And a lot of advancements in mechanical engineering are like very software driven. And like it breaks my heart. And like I love hardware projects. And like I think it's like a lot of like major feats of engineering, like building tunnels or planes is like a huge advancement in like human capability. And like but at the same time, like those industries move slower of like the like crazy things that have come out of them like aren't really that hardware driven, they're more software driven. And I wanted to kind of be at like the root of innovation. You had another follow-up question, but I don't remember what it was.
Well, just why that no that answered my question perfectly. Now, when you were going through the recruiting process, you said like you bought the Cracking the PM interview and looked for companies. Could you go a bit more in depth? Like, how did you think about preparing? Did you do mock interviews? How did you go about getting all of your interviews? Could you just go a little bit more in depth?
Yeah, so I guess I was lucky to kind of realize pretty early that like my resume doesn't fit the normal person in like product management. Like I have a degree in hardware. I've never worked at a software company. I've never officially interned in product. So I knew I like had to go about things like a different way. So all of my interviews, or just about all of them, basically came through cold email. I was lucky enough that like through college, I like used to run a speaker series, like had all these cool people talking. Like most of those speakers came through cold email, so I had like a pretty decent pitch. But basically, like had a cold email that like did some testing on, was able to like refine, and then sent it out to basically like pretty much most companies that have like new grad PM programs. So would target, I don't know, roughly like 7 to 10 people at any given company. Usually aim for kind of like slightly senior, mid-level management. If you can swing people who went to the same school as you, or if you have a connection, that's great. There weren't a lot of those that I was able to fall into, so there's mostly just kind of random people. It was basically just like, hi, my name's Patrick. Like, I have a degree from this school. So like, first part's just kind of like an intro, and it then goes into hey, like I think I'm qualified for these reasons. Of like, I did product for the boring company on Flamethrowers. I traded from like a spoon to a car on Craigslist. I've taken these classes, and then finally it's just kind of like to ask, like, I think I would be a great like fit for this role. Like, would you be happy to chat about it sometime? I think like new grads often like make a mistake of just like emailing people to like grab coffee or to chat about roles in product management. And there's always, it's like kind of like veiled in this like idea of like, I have to form a connection with this person first before getting a referral. I think that's really inefficient. It's actually like pretty hard to do because I like tried to do it initially. And instead, I think it's better just to be like, I'm qualified for these reasons. Like, are you willing to put in a referral for me? like most employees are incentivized to put in referrals. They basically have like payout systems for employees. If you can make like a compelling pitch on yourself, then like you can at least like get in the interview pipeline, as most referrals at companies are like pretty valued. Once you're kind of in that pipeline, then like at least you've made it through that like first hurdle.
Yeah,
So that was
no,
my strategy.
yeah, I completely agree with you. I was basically the same way, where I didn't have the typical profile, and I just started cold emailing the recruiters, and I just skipped the whole referral process and just went right for the referrals to get my interviews. Uh, Now, once you got the interviews, did you do mock interviews with other people? How did you prepare and think about doing product interviews? Because sometimes a lot of people are intimidated when you just get the question like design a phone for a blind person.
Yeah, it's interesting, especially because like there aren't that many. There are resources on like product management interviews, but like not really. Not like the same way as like technical interviews. I was lucky of like cracking the PM interview. It has like a fair amount of like decent stuff in there. So I basically went through those cases with like friends who I thought had like good product senses or had worked on like projects that were very like product centric. And I could just kind of like talk things through. So like a fair amount of whiteboarding, a fair amount of like going over those same questions over and over again. And then also a fair amount of like kind of preparing like canned responses for things that, like you can anticipate. Like everybody has like certain like resume items like on their like portfolio or their resume. It's like how do you like weave like pitch those in like the best way possible in like a product light or in a technical light. Um, of like every interview set, usually has some type of technical interview, some type of product interview, some type of design, and some type of all hands or like all around interview. So it's kind of like how do you like create a story for each of those, and like you can like basically practice those interviews like reasonably effectively, not completely, because interviews are always like have some level of randomness, but that's what I eventually figured out.
Now, okay, so now that you like kind of prep for recruiting, you had an idea, were there any companies that you were specifically targeting, or did you just kind of like go after all of them and hope for the best?
Yeah, I knew. So I wanted to try to stay at like a smaller company, just because like I thought kind of the level of work and what you would be given would be so like closer to the product, you'd be able to have a smaller impact. With that said, because like new grad PM roles are like there just aren't that many of them in tech, I did pretty much like send emails to just about every company with new grad PM programs, for better or for worse. Um, so like kind of went on like blast and like a little bit of like a spam rage and like end up working out. So it did like the whole bandwidth of like I don't know, from like Lyft and Uber and Dropbox and LinkedIn to like Facebook and Google and like Asana. There might have been some other ones in there, but I think those were kind of the main ones.
Now, can you talk a little bit about that process? Like, where'd you end up getting interviews, and what were those interviews like at those companies?
Yeah, so I guess I went through interviews with Uber, Lyft, Dropbox, and LinkedIn. Out of those converted into on-sites for Uber, Lyft, and Dropbox. They were all they actually like started to become pretty repetitive after a while, which is kind of weird. Um, they each had like their own little variety. Let's see. Uber, I think you had to like make like a deck before on like a product feature. From then went into like a phone interview. Um, that given phone interview was something along the lines of like, let's think about how we would design this feature for Uber. Pretty similar case with Lyft actually. So you're given like the prompt of like, how would you design like I don't know like Lyft for people with uh, like visually impaired or for like your grandmother. Um, I think LinkedIn first had like a writing prompt on it, and then it went into an interview about, I think actually like breaking down one of your favorite apps and like how to build a feature on top of that. I made the mistake of actually having to talk about Snapchat, and I was not like that active of a Snapchat user, so I'm like proposing features on Snapchat that like I don't really know. So like I wish I would have known before about like having like an app that you know really well in your back pocket that you can talk about, or at least a handful of them. Perhaps ones that are like slightly more interesting but not too obscure. Like Google Maps is probably not a great answer, but I don't know, like Shazam like might be okay. Um, and yeah, and then the on-sites were all like not that different. They all basically had like an interview with a designer. They all had a technical interview of some type. Dropbox tends to skew slightly less technical, so it's more. At least my year is like give me like a technical project and then kind of break that down. So I actually talked about something with like a mechanical engineering bend on it. The idea was more to kind of like hit the limits of like how well you know this, and perhaps less of like how well like are you as a developer. Um, and then there was also like an interview with like a product manager on like let's say about how you would build this feature. Some of those were perhaps more like metrics and analytics driven, and then there was always like an all around like somebody in kind of like more senior leadership, basically kind of like breaking down your resume, why do you want to work here, things along that line.
Okay. Now, so 3 on-sites at Uber, Lyft, and Dropbox is definitely like super impressive. I think that's way more interviews than most people get. Now, where'd you end up getting offers, and how'd you go about making decision on why you wanted to work at Dropbox?
Yeah, so I guess I ultimately ended up with offers from both Lyft and Dropbox. I realized I was like pretty like incredibly fortunate to kind of swing this. Like what? Like I have a degree in hardware and was at a tunneling company before. Um, I guess of like I, I think like product management is like a craft, and I think it's like a skill set that you can become better at and refine. Like you can like figure out how to build quality products and quality features. And I think like Lyft was really exciting at like the rate of growth and like the rate of responsibility. But at the same time, I'd been at these like smaller companies that were really fast paced and like it's a little bit hard to kind of like handhold there and a little bit harder to teach. So I wanted a place that felt like perhaps they had more of the bandwidth to like take somebody on with basically like no skill set in this area. Um, I also thought at Dropbox, it was like compared to other places I interviewed, it felt like everybody I talked to had like something unique to add to the conversation. I felt like I was learning from everybody there, where I don't think that was true kind of across the board. And I think even still, I've been like pretty impressed with kind of just like the level of like insight and intelligence that everybody has here. I feel like I'm commonly the least smart person in the room.
Did you think about where you wanted to work in terms of the product? Because Dropbox and Lyft are two very, very different companies in terms of what they offer consumer and businesses. So did that play a part at all?
Yeah, it actually a little bit kind of breaks my heart in a way of like I think transportation is really really interesting. I think it's a really hard problem that's like very not solved. At the same time, I thought it made sense for me to kind of prioritize a place that I felt like I could grow more and less about the physical product. I think kind of in like my career and our careers, it's like staying and working somewhere for like 30 years is no longer the norm, and people just basically have to bounce around. Um, and I think because of that, like it means like Dropbox won't be my first job and won't be my last job. So I really wanted to kind of lay that strong base, especially given how like nebulous product management is and like how it can mean so many different things and how like complex it is. So I like prioritize that over compared to like the physical work. That may not be like the recipe for everybody, but that was kind of the rationale I went with.
Okay. So now, is there anything you wish you did differently in the process that you think could have gone better?
Yeah, totally. Um, let's see. Definitely, I like cut some on-site interviews pretty close with showing up on time. Definitely don't do that. That's kind of rule number one, though, right? Don't show up late to your interview. Rule number two, definitely ruined a couple dress shirts with irons at hotels that had like water sitting them with them and like sprayed rust stains. This is again like pretty obscure though. This isn't that helpful. Anyway, like a more like practical aspect. I don't know. I think I wish I prepped more for like design interviews on the design side. I think of like while I like had friends that are like designers in school, I didn't realize kind of like how differently some of like designers think and like how that interview is different than like a product interview or like a technical interview. Um, and I wish I would have spent more time on that. It was kind of more about like the design interviews I did, more about like pushing boundaries and more kind of like far more user centric and like um, like really kind of getting to like the very root problem of like why are we solving this, why are we solving it this way, what does this person look like, which I think can sometimes get kind of lost in the product cycle. And I feel like every design interview I came out of I was like damn I tanked on that. And it was like I learned a lot out of it, but it was interesting. I feel like that was like a failure case for me. um, And then I guess if I had to redo it, I also wish I would have had some like technical projects that were more like software like focused that I could actually talk about in depth. I think that was more of like perhaps I like wish I would have known that 6 months out, and because of that, I think I was like partially like self-selecting to go into PM roles that were perhaps a little less like technically focused. So like I know like Microsoft's like new grad PMs, you're more like program management, like you have like a team of engineers that you more actively work with, where Dropbox is perhaps a little more removed. So we have our kind of team of engineers that we work with, but we also have like an engineering manager who like helps kind of they were directly report to and who like divvies up work. So like it allows us to basically have like a less technical background or a background that's perhaps not purely in software. So I wish I would have known that. Of like I used to have like a stronger like core competency in like actual like building software, and I think I could have leveraged that a little bit more than what I did.
Got it. Now, is there anything that you think a lot of people make mistakes about? Basically, do you have any advice for other people going through this process and tips that you found really helpful that would help others?
Yeah, I guess to start, it's like realizing that there just aren't that many roles in product management, um, especially kind of larger tech companies. Of like, Dropbox has like I don't know, 2,500 employees. The product org is like 100 people. They hire I don't know, like 6 to 7 new grads every year. So companies, there's just kind of far few spots in it. So those spots are like far more competitive. I think it's kind of just going in with that mindset. And I think like I got pretty lucky on kind of how my like timing at the Boring Company lined up and how they were in the media on it and like how I was like lucky enough to work on this project with them, and have like a decent, pretty large impact on that. So I was kind of able to leverage that. Um, I think the other one is that people get cold emails like very wrong all the time. Um, like it kind of blows my mind of like people should just really stop asking for like coffee or getting to know you or talking about product with somebody of there's usually like a thinly kind of veiled level of like this person wants a referral for this position. Like I don't need to sit through 45 minutes of them asking like pointless conversations about like my job and product management. Like I'd rather just have them make a pitch to like tell me that they are qualified, and then I will choose to put in a referral for them or not. And like most people like don't really use their referrals and like are incentivized if you get hired and like want you to be hired. So it's better just kind of like get to the base and be like, I'm qualified like for these reasons. Like what do you think about me being in this job, and kind of letting them to decide. So I guess those are my two takeaways.
Yeah, no, I think that's both two great pieces of advice. I just wanted to say thank you for taking the time talking to me, Patrick. I think you have a really interesting story and provided a lot of great advice, and I think this is going to be really beneficial to other college students out there.
Yeah, happy to help, and best of luck to everybody interviewing out there trying to get another role.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, Patrick, and have a great rest of your day.